they would be somewhat elongated.
So today we're going to talk about the top 5 regrets of the dying, which is a book by Bronnie Ware, an Australian author who, to support herself, started working in palliative care and took care of a lot of people on their deathbed. So she has a tremendous amount of, I would say, a wealth of experience that most of us never get. These very candid conversations with people that are dying. So I should say, these regrets are anecdotal. This is not a systematic review, but more her experience. And the fact that she's an author just means that she was able to communicate these in such a compelling way. It's funny, there's a joke in modern philosophy, which is that like all philosophy after the ancient Greeks is just a footnote on Plato. And I would say that for me personally, every question that one might ask in life is a footnote on the question, how should we live? Like, how ought we to live? Like the question of, where do you live? Like, what should I do for my work? Who should I marry? All of those things, I think, are a footnote on how do I live really well. And so, in the death episode with Ernest Becker, we learned about how we kind of have all these stories that allow us to escape the reality of death. We fool ourselves into thinking that we're not going to die someday. And I think that with these people, where they're on their deathbed, it just removes the veneer of all of that. And I think that there is like kind of an acceptance that a lot of what we focus our time on is in some sense is empty. Like we know that the search for money is everybody kind of knows that that's empty, and yet we do it anyway. We know that the comparison with others through Instagram and other things is like empty. And yet a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media. We know that, promiscuous sex, there seems to be something empty about that. And yet, that tends to happen quite a lot. And so I think what's really interesting about these conversations is it removes that veneer, right? That we know that there are a lot of things that are empty, and yet we do them anyway.
I feel like for the emptiness, that's often because and I'm just basing this on my own personal experience, sometimes in the moment, I don't know what, if there's anything productive or fulfilling I can do in that moment. So maybe I'll just do something, to have fun, in quotes, or like just to relax, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually thought of fortunately for me, that they're relatively rare. It seems like those moments where sometimes maybe I've been working really hard for an extended period and I just want to relax. But I was thinking, what if I woke up and like I didn't have those things that I pursue because I didn't know about those things, say, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Then I can certainly understand, like that'd be difficult because I wouldn't have motivation to do much, Maybe I'd be searching for those things, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. Because it just sounds like there are certain things that are recreational, that are fun to do when you need a break or whatever. And I think that those things are probably fine. And I don't think that people on their deathbed would say you shouldn't do those things.
Yeah. Well, chasing money, for example.
Yes.
Because if I'm honest, if for some reason, if I have a day where I don't feel like doing much, and like, for example, I feel like when I'm sick, I was sick a few weeks ago, just a cold, it wasn't very bad, but just not quite feeling healthy. I was less motivated to do the things that I want to do. Like, say I'm working on the film because I want to be like, as much as possible, in a good mind space, healthy, awake, everything like that. And I was a little bit not that. And then just compounding on that, I was just a bit less motivated than usual to do the film work. So I think I did a bit of that anyway, but I thought I would rather be like just spending today making money, like, because it's less creative and I don't think I'll regret that tomorrow, having a bit of extra money to do more creative things with that money maybe. So for me, like, the making money, yes, it's hollow, ultimately, if that's all you do. But I was thinking, like, on those days where I'm not motivated, it is a decent use of time, as opposed to, let's say, if I tried to relax doing something either unhealthy or that's just doesn't, like, let's say scrolling Instagram mindlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that if I do that, I just don't really get anything out of it. So I almost feel like it was wasted time. You know what I mean? And hence it would be better if I was just making some money at that for that time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, it's really like correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually more seems like it's it's the pursuit of freedom. You see money as a resource that allows you to be free.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that in itself is a tricky thing, I think, because
exactly.
I probably already have enough that I can live and be free to do the things I want to do. But if I get more ambitious with those things, often money helps, and also I think if you had more money, you might be more ambitious without even realizing that. Do you know what I mean? Again, if I use the film as an example, I can definitely make this film with my own funds, but if I was given a grant or something of like a significant amount of money for the film, I could certainly improve things or step things up, or maybe, just be more ambitious. Maybe I'll bring this person on who's really good in that area. Maybe I don't know. It just, sometimes I think it makes you step up your expectations, or, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a tricky balance where I don't want to pursue it for the sake of it, and or even more so, pursue it at the detriment of things that are actually important. But yeah, to also shun it so much at a certain point, that is a bit limiting, So,
This is a tricky balance.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways we're on opposite ends. Because, like, from my perspective, actually, the Buddha talks about how it's the chase. The chase is what keeps you in a cycle of, like, death and rebirth. That it's the wanting, it's the clinging, it's the wanting things to be a certain way. It's the taste, it's the pleasure on the one hand, and then on the other hand, aversion, that I don't want that, I don't want this, and so, this is the first noble truth, that life is suffering, or life is dukkha, that unsatisfactoriness. And so to skip to the end of what the Buddha is suggesting is that in order to escape that constant cycle, samsara it's called, and to go to nirvana is to let go of clinging and aversion, to let go of judging the moment and seeing how it's bad and then trying to make it better, but rather to merely observe without judgment. And so that's something that I've practiced quite a bit, to let go of the need for the circumstances to be different, and rather to search within for, can I be fine with what's happening? So
cool.
Yeah.
How can I adapt to what's happening to get to the outcome that I...
Not even to get to the outcome, but just to be equanimous regardless of the circumstances. See, so, but as you're kind of alluding to, there is a balance here, because then you don't want to be complacent. That there is, as we talked about in the Peck podcast, it's like the struggle and the search for meaning and extending yourself is part of the meaning of life. So if it's true that you're equanimous, why do anything?
Yeah. Also, just being a person you make changes in the world, right? Everything you do somehow changes the world.
Yep.
So, and some things you push for and fight for because you think it's right, and you make a change. So you, in that sense, you're fighting against the equilibrium.
I think it's okay. I think that's maybe slightly like I think that's a different. Yeah. So I think yes, you make changes, but are you attached to whether or not that change is good or bad? So there are changes, but there's also like, and so there are outcomes and there are consequences to your actions. But then there's a separate question about whether or not you judge those consequences and changes as being a bad thing. But then the question is, if you don't judge things as being good or bad, how do you know what to do?
Yeah.
How do you know how to act? So for me, so first of all, that's an unsolved problem. At least I'm not aware of a conclusive synthesis on that. But what I will say for me, my working hypothesis, or the way that I try and do this, is I treat myself as a conduit. That when I'm teaching and I've done all this preparation, but then I haven't rehearsed and things come out, it's because that's my purpose. That's what I was supposed to do. Sometimes this is called your karma. That's your duty. That's the reason that you exist. So when I feel most aligned with my work, whether that's science or teaching or whatever, it feels like if I was to resist, if I wasn't to do that, actually that would be going against the flow. That when I go with the flow, these outcomes happen, but they were always supposed to happen. It's a bit woo-woo-ish, but that's how I feel about it. And that actually goes to, so there are 5 regrets, and the first one is the most important one. It's the one that I focused on the most. I think I want to leave that to last.
Tease.
Yeah, we'll talk about. We'll warm up and we'll warm into that, and we'll talk about it last. I think that deserves the most attention. And then the next 2 regrets, I think, require a moderate amount, and the last 2, I think we can get through pretty quickly. But so the second regret is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And I think that's an interesting place for us to start, because we're both hard workers. And actually, I think that we would regret it if we didn't work hard.
Yeah. My take on that is, in a job that I don't really
couldn't agree more.
Find fulfilling, because I can understand that. That's almost the pursuit of money in a way, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
But because you could work hard on your relationship, you could work hard on raising your kids, and I don't think you would regret those things. That's right. You could even work hard in a job that gives you incredible sense of meaning and fulfillment. Yeah. Filmmaker, cancer researcher. Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head. You're kind of ruining the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. No, we'll go into it anyway. That's the point. Yeah. That you. I wish I hadn't squandered my time doing things that are meaningless and empty. Yeah. Maybe another way of thinking about it is, make sure your work is fulfilling to you. Right. Because most people have to spend a decent amount of time working. Oh yeah, most of their so it's like, let's say your day is broken up into like 8 hours at work, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of your own time. The thing about the 8 hours of work is that is where most of your focus goes. And so while there is quote unquote 8 hours of our own time, none of us really feels that way. That work's a full-time job. Yeah, I gotta say, since not working full-time, that I'm definitely more like energy and ability in those non-work hours. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Which is very valuable, actually. Yeah. I'm in this special circumstance where
the 8 hours that I spend at work are better than what I would have done voluntarily.
So elaborate on that, please.
So right now I'm writing a bunch of grants, and this is a good place to start actually, because it's all of these regrets are about perspective. So there is a perspective that I'm very much in the minority on this, but there is a perspective that grant writing is terrible and it's a waste of time. And I would say that there's a lot of resentment around grant writing because, you're a researcher, you're an academic, you're supposed to be solving cutting edge problems in the world, and yet you have to spend at least a third of your time basically convincing the government that you should be allowed to keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So then the government will give you a certain amount of money. It's never enough for you to do what you want to do.
And this is the majority of researchers, do you think, would feel like this?
Oh, yeah.
Like that it's a blight on their time.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's, before I got into academia, that's what I was told.
Yeah.
That's just...
Sorry, mate, this is something you have to do.
It's a slog.
Yeah.
And people don't like it.
Yeah. Also, I believe like maybe 2 years ago or something, you were not looking forward to it, right?
Yeah, because of the story I was told.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So ideally, we can convey it to up and coming researchers in a neutral way, as opposed to
I mean, I'm just even positive.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely in the minority.
Yeah.
So there's this thing where it's like you got to do a bunch of writing, and it's like I don't want to. It's marketing, it's sales. I don't want to promote myself. I want to just do the work. So and
it interrupts your focus on the work.
True. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's the story.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say that like I was also given a similar story about my PhD, about doing a PhD, that most people don't enjoy doing it at all, and it's like a slog and all those kinds of things. Okay, so we're in grant season now, and the first couple of grants will be submitted by the end of this month or next month. I can't remember, but so everybody's in this kind of malaise right now. We're all competing. The other thing is we're all competing against each other. That's the other thing. There's a finite amount of resources, and it's like you want to help your colleagues, but there's also an underlying understanding that this is a it's a zero sum game. Yeah, it's a zero sum game. You if you win, I lose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's how most people feel about it. I love grant writing. I love writing. I like the only way to become a better writer is to write a lot. So I love any opportunity to write. I want to be a craftsperson. We've talked about it in previous podcasts, but like I love the feeling of like working in deep silent focus for several days or weeks, maybe even months, till you have something compelling, like a carpenter or a concert pianist or a poet. Those are my people. That's who I want to work like. So I now have, I'm obligated to write grants for 3 months. Fantastic. I just get to focus on writing. What am I writing about? I'm writing about how we're going to create the future, about how the technology that we're going to create is going to help a lot of people. And you have to be very, very specific about this is exactly what we're going to do. This is who's going to do it. This is the amount of money it takes. I like being forced to organize my thoughts in that way. And then once you have a plan, it's like, if it's a really good plan, all you have to do is execute the plan. Things never go to plan, but it's like really great to have a solid plan. So I love grant writing, and I think part of the perspective that makes people resentful about it, maybe part of it is like, why do I have to fight for my job? Like, if I was a banker, you would have guaranteed job security, or whatever. Like in a normal job, you typically have job security, and in academia, you certainly don't have that pretty much at any level. Okay, maybe you can get tenure, but till you get to that point, and we don't have tenure in Australia. So in Australia, it's like you really got to keep fighting. So then the way that I look at that is that academia is a privilege, like the kind of work that we get to do is so special, and it's so uniquely fulfilling. So you don't deserve to be an academic. You're not owed that. You have to prove that you deserve to belong. And of course there's politics with everything, but it's not as if you can go into banking and escape politics, So what you're doing is really special, and it's a privilege. So you actually have to earn that privilege. Okay, so I think that's one of the reasons that people don't like the whole enterprise of grant writing, is that they don't want to have to fight for their jobs, which, I mean, I totally get it. Job insecurity is really annoying. But, my take on that is, what we're doing is what we get to do is a privilege. Then there's another piece of this that makes grant writing, that makes people resentful about grant writing, which is that they think that other people are judging them. So there's like this grant review panel that reads your grants, and that process seems to be opaque. That you don't know who's reviewing your thing. So maybe it'd be a person who's like totally outside of your field and doesn't really understand why the work you're doing is important. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe their kids. There might be a ton of things on the personal side of the reviewer that you get that make them give you a lower score than what you think you deserve. But as I was saying to you earlier, man, so I'm applying for this grant scheme. It's very competitive, and 90% of people don't get one. So this is the way that I think about this, right? That here's who you're competing with. You're competing with people that did well enough in high school to get into university, that did well enough in undergrad to get a PhD, that did well enough in their PhD to become a postdoctoral fellow, and then can be bothered to write one of these grants, which is such an undertaking. Not everybody writes one. So first of all, you are...
It takes like a month or two to prepare.
I would say at least, yeah. Plus, the thing about that is there's all this background work that you have to have done, because you want to show that the science is kind of established. So it's like maybe the writing process takes a month or two, or maybe even 3, but there's all this background work in, doing the science, creating the relationships, getting the budget together. Yeah, it's always... Yeah, for me, it's like to get to the technology to a place where I feel like I can write a grant about it. That was like a 5-year journey. So the actual grant writing process might take a month or 2. Okay, so first of all, you're competing with a very, very small number of capable people. Then, amongst those capable people, 90% don't get one. Okay. So then you're scored on 4 criteria, like research quality, significance, innovation, and capability. So the question is, amongst these most capable people, did you write a research project that is better than 90% of those incredibly capable people? Are you coming up with an idea that is more innovative than 90% of these incredibly capable people? Have you come up with an idea where if you were to get the best possible outcome, the significance of the impact is better than 90% of these incredible capable people? And is the team that you've assembled better, more capable than 90% of these incredibly capable people? So for me, if you didn't win a grant, it's because you were competing in such a tough game. It's not because the grant writing process is opaque, which maybe it is, but they also publish the guidelines of how these grants are to be scored. So sometimes there's this thing where it's like, I heard it the other day. I know they say this in the grant guidelines, but this is actually what they want. So then there's this other voodoo version of the grant guidelines that actually this is what the grant viewers want to see. So people come up with a story that makes the grant writing process intrinsically unfair, because it means that they told you they want something, but actually they want something else, and only a few people know what that true thing is. for me, man, I don't buy into any of that. I'm not interested in what you think the voodoo version of the grant outlines are. It's like, if you didn't want a grant, can you go back into your proposal and really say of all of those things that you were better than 90% of people? 90% of an incredibly capable upper echelon of people that are very talented. So if you can't answer that question honestly and say yes, then maybe it's not because there's a voodoo set of guidelines. You know? For me, it's like, I'm going to assume that the system is fair but highly competitive, and then I'm going to play the game as if these are the actual rules of the game. I'm going to hold myself to that very high standard. So I don't allow that cynicism to poison me. So yeah, man, I think that there are a few pieces to why people are very cynical about grant writing. And as I said, I'm in the minority of people. Like I said to my boss the other day, Paul, I freaking love grant season. And he's like, I think you're the only person I've ever met that can say that honestly. So it's like...
And how do you square that with the fact that it's just, you could see it as a distraction from focusing on the research itself?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't look at it that way at all. It's like, as we were talking about before the podcast, it's like there are economic realities.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you want to do this work. Who's paying that salary?
Yeah.
You want to be a craftsperson. Who's your benefactor?
Yeah.
There's another way of saying that. So your benefactor is the university. Is the government, and they make it very clear about what they want. If with an actual benefactor, their reasoning process is opaque. Why are they commissioning you to paint this painting? That all of that is actually opaque. This is like, there are set guidelines, and I don't want to think that the system is unfair.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's just being realistic, living in reality. Hey.
Yeah.
Either figure out a way to make enough money that can sustain this thing,
right?
Whether that be through the thing or outside of it,
right?
Or then this, we were saying that before as well. It's kind of it's just the reality of the world. It makes sense for something to be viable. It has to be economically viable, which is...
That's right.
Well, you can like it or not, but as you say, take the Buddhist perspective. That's just how it is. So accept it and don't judge it. Just work with it. Yeah. And
like for me, it's like, can you embrace it? Like,
yeah,
acceptance, and then how is this positive actually?
Yeah. I love the parallels as well, because it's the same for making a film. Like, I think most films would get funding from somewhere, from a studio or something like that, or an investor. For me, I'm just putting down my own money. But it obviously takes money to create something, and that's it's the same kind of thing, whether you want to pitch it to people and have them provide the funding, or sustain it yourself somehow. But you can't. It feels like a natural thing that a lot of people might have, is like wishing, couldn't I just have the funds and do whatever I want? But that's just not reality. So
it's very entitled, I think.
Yeah. Or even just like the not saying like I should have that, because I think that'd be entitled. But if you're just like, wouldn't it be amazing if? I guess there's no help. That's just not a helpful way to think, though. Unless you then make an action plan to make that a reality. Yeah.
For me, it's like the process of being able to put yourself in the position to get a grant is intrinsically satisfying. Like all the work that I had to do to establish this technology, and then all the writing, many hours of deep, silent, focused writing, to get it to a place where I felt it was compelling. All of that, I would do. If I that's what I was trying to get at earlier, where I was like, if I had 8 hours to do whatever I wanted to do, I might not actually have the discipline to do something as difficult as this. Mm-hmm. That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's like we talked about in the fun episode. It's like actually the things that are most fun require overcoming resistance. So the fact that in my job I have to do all this work cognitively and project management and creating relationships and otherwise to get myself to a place where I can keep having the privilege to do it. All of the work that I did to do that is way more fun than what I would have done if I had 8 hours of relaxation, basically.
Yeah.
All
right, so to tie this into the second regret,
yeah.
I guess we're just saying you are fulfilled with your work, even with the grant writing.
Oh yeah, I love it. I think I had my summary of that was become less outcome oriented. Is the process a good in itself? The desired outcome might never come, and even if it does come, it might not be as satisfying as you'd like. A focus on outcomes leads to resentment. That was my summary of regret 2.
Nice.
So
That's
I'm just less
well
outcome
put,
oriented.
mate. Well put.
Oh, thanks.
Focus on outcomes leads to resentment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, why do you do all this work in a job you don't like? It's like because you need the money or the status or whatever comes about as a result of doing the thing.
My take on that would be not the focus on outcome leads to resentment, but the expectation of an outcome leads to resentment. Yeah. Because I think that's when, to me, that's what, and I think I try and avoid that because I really don't want to become, what's the word, jaded.
Yep.
And I guess as life goes on, as the older you get, the more likely it is you'll become jaded because you've had more experiences that could have.
Yeah, if you're unintentional. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's just natural as well. Like, you might have expectations of things, and if they're not met, then yeah.
But I think later with training, it becomes natural that you let go of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, maybe an untrained or as I would say, unintentionally. The natural thing is to have a focus on outcomes and expectations, but it can become natural with training to let go of outcomes and to let go of expectations.
Yeah, I think a really liberating thought I had, probably in like my when I was around 19 or 20, I think as a kid, because I was so fortunate, I felt entitled to certain things, and then when I became a young adult and didn't get a lot of stuff, and then I had the epiphany of like, you're not entitled to anything, and no one owes you anything. But it was epic. Realizing that, I was like, it was difficult, but also like very liberating. Yeah. And then I think it also makes you then grateful every time something does happen that's good for you. Wow, I really appreciate that. I'm thankful for that. So I imagine it'll be similar for a lot of privileged kids.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's tricky because as a parent you want to make sure they have all the opportunities, but at a certain point when you're a certain maturity, it's probably very healthy to have to be on your own and fail like that, and then have that realization. Yeah, pretty much no matter who you are or where you're at, like, you're really not entitled to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so you may as well embrace that.
Yeah, even if you're like an esteemed professor.
Yeah.
Or a very successful filmmaker, or anything. Yeah. You're not really entitled to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because it's so unbecoming if you think you are.
Right.
That's just...
Yeah.
We've probably all seen that, where someone feels that they're entitled to something if they don't get it, and it's like embarrassing or awkward. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why Keeping Up with the Kardashians is such a fantastic resource, because those girls work hard, my friend.
Okay.
Obviously taking the piss.
Yeah. I've never watched it, so I.
Yeah, well, you
I can't relate. Yes.
Gotta pay attention to what Kim's doing, my friend.
True that.
Yes.
Quote of the episode right there.
Okay, so let me talk about some other notes that I made in that regret thing, and we'll see if anything pops up. So
in regards to the second regret.
The second regret.
Okay. Of focusing on working too much.
When you are doing work you love, it is simply a natural extension of who you are. Yeah, and then my own note here is so it's not hard work per se, but it's work that extends us wrongly by attending to the wrong things. And then another thing that's said in the book is, if you love what you do, you become more open to the flow of money because you don't really need it. It just says because you become happier as a person. If you don't make it about money, money will attach itself to you naturally, often through unimagined sources. Money flows best when the intention is honorable.
Do you want to go more into that? Because I feel like part of that could be the dangerous... what's that thing? There's like a book or something there where if you believe it'll happen. Do you know what that is?
Oh yeah, The Secret?
Yeah. So that I won't even go into it, but I can imagine the problem for a lot of people if they actually believe that. If they think something will happen without doing any work, it'll happen. Like it seems just not reality. So yeah, but I think I can see what you're saying here, which is yeah. You want to elaborate more on that?
Sure. Like, and it's actually I remember talking to my cousin about this The Secret thing, like where if you focus on it, like eventually it'll manifest. And he said something interesting in defense of it from like I would say more scientific perspective. He was just like, if you, let's say, because one of the things that you might do is have what's called a vision board, where you kind of have like, let's say a picture of a French chateau and you see it every day and then eventually it manifests. Now his take on that was like, what you're doing is you are attuning your brain to become focused on the desired outcome. And so therefore, when you go out into the world, you filter information in a way that allows you to, like, because you have this thing in mind that you're trying to get towards, you filter things better such that you can get to that outcome. So he said, I just see that as like a way to like remind myself of priorities, which is, I thought that was pretty interesting actually. I hadn't heard that take.
Yeah. No, I sorry, I should clarify. I don't. I think there's some good in the thoughts, but I think they can also easily be taken too far, in the sense of if he was to say, if you have the picture of the chateau and you think about it every day, you'll just magically get one or something.
Magically get one. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
Some people seem to have taken that away from
It's The Secret, my friend. Yeah, that doesn't seem reasonable, but
yeah. But I yeah.
Yeah, it's like you focus on what you're like consistently exposed to.
Yeah.
Which is why, as you know, like I used to have, my board was like just the people that I admired the most, with quotes from them. And my whole thing was like, you know, they say that you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with most. I was like, well, I'm going to be very intentional with creating an environment at home where I'm artificially putting myself around people that I admire. Socrates, the Buddha, Aristotle.
Terry Crews.
Next. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Anyway, yeah, there's like a certain folk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you kind of.
Anyway, but so to tie back to your takeaway there was, if you're not focused on the money, but they're doing good, and that, then the money sort of naturally comes out of that. Yeah.
That's what I've experienced. Yeah, that like
I've also experienced that.
Yeah, it's like if you work hard and surround yourself with good people, like that things come out that are good.
Yeah, it's cool. Hey, so my quick own version of that was, I think with the Stronger series, both of them I made them just for the love of it, there was not real. I don't know. I didn't expect any monetary gain from that. But I feel like the number of opportunities that came out of it, in terms of like people seeing my love for gymnastics and then offering me this and that, it's like adjacent. It's not directly related to Stronger, but because they can see your passion for this sport, they offer you opportunities. And often I don't even think the money is not even, almost like you said, the money is not really that important. Some of the experiences, I'm like, this is incredible, yeah, and then they all naturally lead to like opportunities to make money if you want to out of those things, yeah, so I definitely can see that too. Whereas if you were like, I'm just gonna try and be a great gymnastics coach so I can get to the top and make money, yeah, I don't know, right. People just notice that naturally you notice like a lack of passion, and hence you wouldn't be as excited to offer that person, I don't know, some opportunity that, yeah. I don't know if you agree with all that, man.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think I could have been more eloquent with that, but hopefully you get.
No, I got you, and that's, yeah. I guess my summary of that was just like try to live without like less of an outcome-driven life. But yeah, I think you were right in saying that. Actually, it's like the expectation of certain outcomes. So you could, yeah, if you're in a position to do it for the love of the thing, do it for the love of the thing, and like the rewards will come eventually.
Yeah, and they may not be monetary, and that's.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that for me, actually, it's more like, as I said, is the process a good in itself? Because the outcome might not come.
Yeah.
People will often work for a promotion for the promise of a certain amount of money that they don't get, they get passed up for that promotion, and it's like, that really sucks because the whole process was awful for you.
Yeah. And
you had to act inauthentically, unfortunately. And so for me, man, we've talked about this a lot, but for me, money is so much less valuable of a resource than attention. You never get your attention back. Never. It's just lost. Money can come and go, but what you attend to, man, is... So if I'm attending to something that I feel is a waste of time or something like that, or maybe even worse than that, I get really angry. I'm like, this is bad.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a fascinating thing, what makes people angry as well. I think that tells you a lot about the person.
Right.
Yeah. I also... One of the few things that makes me angry is if I feel like my time is being wasted.
I freaking hate it.
Which I guess is the same as attention.
Sure.
Well, it's not quite as bad as attention being wasted. Yeah. That's cool, man. Getting angry about your attention being... Yeah.
Not good. And yeah, so whenever there's like... I remember I was in a position when I was a lecturer at Sydney Uni, they were like, do you want to create the math course for engineering? And I just could see that it was kind of like not well managed. And they were like, but we'll pay you X amount of money just to be in these meetings. And I was like, cool. Like, this is now an opportunity. This is where I have to prove to myself that actually attention is more valuable than money. And it actually was not very hard for me to say no to that. But yeah, it's like one of those things again where it's like, it might seem unnatural in the moment, but with training it becomes natural. And it's just obvious to me that the trade of attention for money is such a bad one. So, yeah. That's
cool. It's cool that is also, I think, a very abnormal view on it. I think the norm seems to be that, yeah, of course you give your attention for money. Everyone has to. And it's a good use of your attention to make money. Yeah. But I feel like that's when you think the bigger game plan is when you see the flaws in that, right? Like, what do you want the money for? What are you going to do with it? And then oftentimes you can achieve a lot of those things without the money. So you may as well just do those things now. And in fact, the money will stifle, like the time it takes, yeah. that analogy of the fisherman that you
Yes.
gave a long time ago seems appropriate.
I was just going to say that, like, one way that I often think about this is, like, how do I get to the end goal immediately? So this is the one of the big modern lies is that you work a 9 to 5 for, let's say, 50 years so that you can enjoy your retirement. But for me, it's like, how can I retire now? you know?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that one answer to that is, like, actually retirement isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Like, if you talk to retired people, there's often a, like, kind of depression that comes along with that, because it's not as fun as you might think to not have a job. And in fact, we know that, when unemployment rates go up, depression also goes up. There's a certain, there's something nice as a human to feel needed and wanted, and that you're fulfilling a role in society. So, when I realized that, like, that actually the end goal of retirement is an empty myth. It's like, what would you do now, if I was retired and I could do anything and I had infinite wealth, like, what would I do? And I realized that, it's like going back to these entitled people. They often don't live very fulfilling lives, because it's the fight against struggle that has meaning. So if there isn't any struggle in your life, actually my grandfather said something really cool, which he goes, God gave us the gift of ignorance so that we have the pleasure of finding things out.
That is cool.
Is awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that, in fact, it's one of the things that is said in this chapter on regret, is like, it's all about the way that you look at the work. Like, do you look at the work as like a slog, or do you look at it as an opportunity for growth? And this is all perspective. Like, you could be doing the exact same thing, for instance, grant writing, being like, this is a slog versus this is an opportunity for me to get good at writing.
Yeah.
And for me, I actually then become grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same activity, but
that's crazy that
there's a positive glow that comes at it for me.
That's so cool. The power of perspective. Maybe we should even have a whole podcast on perspective.
I feel like that's what this is, like, a whole, like, if there's a meta theme to somewhat elongated, it's about perspective.
Yeah, because that idea that you can do the exact same thing with one perspective and you come out of it drained and, like, frustrated that you had to spend your time doing that, or with a different perspective and you come out of it energetic and excited. That's crazy.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
And also, perspective doesn't seem like a difficult thing to achieve.
It's free.
Yeah. It just takes some thinking. Maybe some creativity.
It takes discipline,
Yeah.
Because you will often be in the minority. So it takes discipline, it takes courage, because, again, to be in the minority is really scary. It can feel like you're wrong. So it takes courage.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, the things that it takes are the 4 cardinal virtues.
That's very cool.
It takes wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, which for me, justice is a focus on the betterment of humanity rather than the betterment of yourself.
Damn. That's epic, man.
It is.
Yeah. Very cool.
Let's move on to the next regret, because we spent a lot of time on the second regret.
Yeah.
Well, we can come back to it another time. Regret number 3. Yeah, I want to remind people that these are regrets that people have on their deathbed. This is a person who's going to die now and reaching out to somebody that's taking care of them and saying, don't live like I did. Promise me that you won't. Regret number 3. I wish that I had the courage to express my feelings. Yeah. People keep things bottled up. So the question is why? So I said here, we must...
It's the essence of life, I think.
Expressing yourself?
Yeah.
Why? Say more about that.
Because to take the extreme of never expressing yourself, that's obviously a great shame. And to have the courage to express yourself truly and openly, I think it lends itself to many opportunities of connection, and outcomes that you could never have imagined.
Yep.
Yeah, and so you don't know what you would miss if you don't do it. You won't know. And then even like if it results in things happening that you think you don't want to happen, it feels like to me that's the right thing to happen still. Because if it's happening based on you expressing your truth, then that's okay. And that's the right thing to happen, as opposed to repressing something and having almost like a fake reality in the world that's not consistent with your internal,
Cool. I believe all of that, but just to play devil's advocate, because that's the best way to start a conversation. But yeah, just for instance, some of my Asian friends, there is a cultural thing around being courteous and maybe not even speaking up, especially not speaking up to people that are older than you. In the Korean language, deference is built into the language, that if it's a woman that's older than you, she's onni. She's your older sister, essentially. Yeah, I remember talking about this regret with one of my Chinese friends and him being like, why would you ever do that?
Why would you ever express yourself?
Yeah, because there was a guy, one of the stories is there was a guy who, I can even maybe read out exactly what he said. Yeah, I was too scared to let my feelings show. I worked hard and kept the family at a distance. They never really knew me. And my friend was like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, that's honorable to like keep your family shielded from your negative feelings so that they never have to feel those negative emotions. And that they see you as like a strong, like you are the leader of the household, and that leader of the household is in some sense immortal, impervious to damage. So there's a certain amount of honor in not expressing your feelings. So yeah, that's just a cultural.
Yeah, it's like protecting everyone else from it. Yeah.
So it was interesting because in his eyes, it's like the best outcome would be like if you held it together with no chinks in the armor, and that your family just never saw any sign of weakness.
Yeah. To me, the shame is they never really know you then.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's what this guy said. He said, I kept them at a distance. They didn't deserve to be so alone. I wish they really knew me. They
didn't deserve it.
Yeah, like the family, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, by not sharing your feelings, actually they're alone as well. Because as you said, without authentic expression, there can be no intimacy. There can be no genuine connection.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe, because I see the value in what your friend's saying about being it's like being the classic stoic man or whatever of a household, say. And there seems to be good in protecting, especially your children, of course. But then I guess it's having the courage and wisdom to, at the right moments, express that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would actually maybe even say, because what you're reminding of me of is the other day I saw this video that went viral in China. It's a girl, she must be like 4 years old, 4 or 5, and she's like saying to her dad, like, if you come home angry from work, don't take it out on mum. Don't say mum didn't work hard. Everybody works hard. We know you work hard. Doesn't mum also work hard? If you don't want to come home and express your emotions, then don't bring out your anger here. We're a family. We can talk about it together and we can get through it together. It was like so wise.
That's like that how we're talking about the baby being enlightened, but not being able to express it. She's in that.
And she was able to express it.
Yeah.
So I
that's
think
epic. Yeah.
I think that there is like a natural wisdom that children have
Yeah.
that like for some reason we don't think they have. I think that children can, like, not to be abusive about this, but I think that they can withstand more than we think. And I think that actually it can be a loving thing to show the child that, first of all, we label these emotions as being negative. That's like an important, coming back to judgment. It's like we think that anger is bad, but actually it's just a natural consequence sometimes. So there isn't the need to judge it as being bad. Actually, it's natural, and that if you associate it with being bad, then you have a shame associated with it, and maybe you'll hide it. So what is that maybe also teaches that child that anger is bad and shameful, and there are certain parts of you that you should be ashamed of, that you should hide.
Yeah, it feels dishonest as well.
Dishonest. I mean, although like it happens, like it might happen. It might not. They might not be doing it like knowingly, like because there's such a.
But as you were saying that, I had the thought of, I respect the honesty of someone that gets angry and shows it, without perhaps putting aggression or negativity or something like that.
That's right. Like you can actually express anger healthfully.
Yeah.
As Aristotle says, like you want to have the right emotion at the right time and the right degree towards the right people, etc. So it's a matter of degree. I think in this case, this girl showed courage actually, because she also said to her father, "Don't you see that you being angry around us, it scares us. We're kids." You know, she had such self-awareness to be like, that's scary, and also the courage to tell her father, you know, we're scared. I think actually children have access to a pretty wide array of emotions, and then for some reason we encourage them to close off certain emotions, and to just go along with things. I mean, if you think about it, like in school, like in primary school, everybody has to like sit in a row, sit, you know, they have to sit in a certain way, they have to be quiet, you know, there are all these like certain expectations that are maybe necessary in order for the classroom to function well. But of course the side effect of that is that their personalities become abrogated, and then that continues maybe your whole life, right? Like maybe your whole life, that you then go to university, you get a job, and then you're in a corporate executive atmosphere for your whole life. So from the age of 6 to 60, your personality was muted. And it's not as if like you know how to turn the volume up on that when you get to 60. So the point is, like, you know, we have all these emotions, and sometimes it is what's the word, inappropriate to express certain emotions in certain degrees in certain ways towards certain people at certain times. But I feel that with training, again, like with training, it doesn't happen naturally, but these are the kinds of things that I think one should attend to, that you have an appropriate and nurturing and loving and self-accepting attitude towards your emotions. And I think that when you have that kind of attitude, that you can approach, for instance, anger with curiosity, like, why am I feeling angry right now? Neutrally.
How does one train that?
What do you mean?
You said with training.
Just do it. What do you mean? Like, like if you find anger coming up, be mindful. I think mindfulness is one. Like, so the ways that I do it are journaling, mindfulness. I
think it's also accepting. Trying to be neutral about.
Yes, that's right.
Don't judge your emotions.
That's right. Yeah.
Because that would be difficult for some people, probably.
Yeah, right.
Especially when
it requires training.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I began with meditation, where like you observe the breath with no story, and then you can observe pain with no story. And then, when negative emotions come up, you can be like, okay, that's interesting. What do I actually feel in this moment? And then you feel the physiological signature of anger. What does it actually feel like? The label that we give to anger, what actually does that mean? And then you can feel those things and just see that there's patterns of energy. I mean, and that we then associate a story with them. So then once you remove the negative story, what you can actually find sometimes is that there's a lot of energy there. Like Carl Jung talks about how we kind of push those parts of ourselves, we repress them into the shadow. And then unfortunately what that means is that like you have to kind of go through your life like kind of one hand tied behind your back, because there's a whole aspects of you that never get to be expressed. Now, how much cooler would it be if you could integrate all of those things? That the anger or resentment that you have towards some person that maybe isn't even in your life anymore, ex-girlfriend, parents, ex-boss, all these resentments that you have, they're taking energy and thought away from the present moment. Imagine that you could command those to be part of doing whatever positive thing that you'd like to do in the world. It gives you more energy. So what you want to do, in my belief, this is what I believe, is you want to integrate all these things so that you're a whole functioning person. And the other cool thing about that, as you said, is that then the connections that you make with people are very deep, because you're being your true full self. And it gives you and them the signal that it's okay to like express anger, express fear, express jealousy, like even ignoble emotions, ignoble thoughts, that those are actually fine and natural. And I think that when they're embraced by yourself and others in that love, then what ends up happening is that you go for those positive outcomes. You want to grow. You don't want to just be a lazy Kent. That the person who's given love, I don't actually think will just want to sit down and be lazy and be arrogant, and that I think that there actually is like this impulse to grow, and if that's nurtured with love, it'll go in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think I wonder if it's just, for me, certainly the idea of growth is so exciting.
Yeah.
Also, I thought I had, talking back where you were saying the God gave us the gift of ignorance. I was thinking how computer games actually gave me this epiphany, I think, because then I'd be playing a game and you'd put all the cheats in, and then then the game is so easy, and then you're like, this isn't fun. And then I think I quickly realized the same about life, where if you had all the money or everything given to you, it would kind of be...
That's right.
There's no challenge.
Yeah,
so,
that would suck.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? So thank you, computer games.
Yes.
But no, on the point you would... Sorry, what were you saying just before?
Like being integrated and how, I guess, maybe being loving to somebody does not make them lazy, or they won't have drive.
Yeah. I've lost it. Sorry, guys.
Yes. Maybe so certain emotions are labeled bad, and then we shut those off as being bad, and then certain aspects of our personality never get to be fully expressed. And then you're not really yourself. You're some muted version of yourself, and then what it means is that when you go out into the world, it's difficult to make those intimate, genuine connections with people, because...
we're talking about the growth.
Sure, yep.
Yeah, I think, I'm not certain about this, but that most people find growth an exciting prospect. I think what makes us do everything, because we can improve, and I notice whenever maybe if I identify a thing in the world I think will grow, so like whether that be like a athlete, you know what I mean, or a sporting club, or SpaceX, for example, was a good one for me, where why am I being opaque? I might as well tell you guys the things, but I like SpaceX many years ago when I just thought, oh, this is epic, when they landed the first Falcon 9, the first stage, and they made it reusable, like that's never been done before. And it wasn't very well known, and I was like, this is, as in the layman still doesn't really know this, which to me it's incredible. Like it's going to change the future. It's so obvious. Anyway, I found that also exciting, and so I got really excited about SpaceX because I could just see they're on this trajectory, and it made me love SpaceX because I could see the future growth. You know what I mean? Still do, like
I see what you're saying.
with Starship, yeah, the same thing. I stumbled upon this. This is super random, but I won't go into the details. But basically, there's a guy that bought a football club in the UK, and he's a Bitcoin maximalist, and he's kind of incorporating some of the philosophy of Bitcoin into his football club. And the club is in a very low league. It's like 10 leagues. Like the English Premier League is arguably the best in the world, and they have so many divisions. And I guess that's why the cream rises to the top. I think there's like at least 10 divisions, and he bought this club in like the 10th division or something. And then his first year managing it, they got promoted to the next league. Like they won that and got to the next league. The second year, they won that league and got to the next league. So they're on their way. And I'm just so excited where like, because I definitely think his vision and ambition is very different to most, and I believe in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just find that exciting. Now I'm following that random team because I'm like, the prospect of them growing and developing, even though you could watch Manchester City with like amazing team, amazing players, amazing stadium, they've got everything, and I enjoy watching them, but there's something exciting about watching this team with like things you can relate to, where like the pitch has got some divots in it. You know, like it's so cheap to get a ticket so anyone could go. Their players train twice a week. I train more than that with my gymnastics, you know what I mean? So I don't know, and then to see each year if they get a little bit better, that's very exciting to me. So I think that growth is a naturally human, exciting thing. Even I noticed gymnastics, I'm always motivated if I can see that I can get better and achieve that thing. If I start feeling like, oh, am I ever going to get that? And I'm like not progressing, it's very hard to, it's much harder than when you're seeing small little bits of progress, you know? Yeah. So I think that's an exciting part of life. And they even use it in computer games. Like, I think they make the more addictive computer games, the ones where you achieve this little thing and then you can unlock this, and that just makes the game so much more fun than if that wasn't the feature.
Yeah, growth is like intrinsically rewarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be a shame if you didn't have that kind of level of struggle in your life. Yeah. And then the ability to overcome that struggle. Yeah. That's where all the enjoyment, the true enjoyment, really is. Yeah. And with that mindset, it should be easy to accept, well, it's a big struggle, big road ahead, and that's exciting. Oh, yeah. As opposed to, that's going to be hard, you know, and that's not, to spin that negatively, you know. Right. Yeah. I love your mindset, man, because I almost feel like if I told you, hey, we can do this thing, but it's really hard, you'd be like, excellent. Yes. What time would you like me to be? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and then finally on that, it's super random, but another on that point and different kind of scenario environment. My brother, my mate, and I, we all climb Mount Fuji. The way you normally do that is get a bus to the sort of, you kind of take, the bus kind of takes you halfway up the mountain, and then at that point there's no more roads, so then you hike. You know, I think it's like, there's even like hotels halfway up the mountain, or not hotels, but like accommodation, so that you can sort of do half the trek, sleep, and then wake up and do the other half just before dawn, and then you can watch the sunrise, which is amazing. Anyway, but we didn't do we're all pretty fit young guys, and we, for various reasons, we decided we were going to ride bikes to the base camp. I can't remember what we did. Oh, we just thought it was cooler than taking a bus. And so we rode bikes. These bikes, we got them e-bikes, so they had batteries. Anyway, and so we woke up at literally like 1 a.m. or something, because we were like, if we wake up at 1, we should be able to get to the summit by dawn and we can watch the sunrise.
So we got these e-bikes. I remember I didn't even think about this, but like you're riding up a mountain, so it's all uphill. You know what I mean?
Right.
How did we not think about this? But anyway, so
yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. We get halfway up and all our batteries die. Because like the first half, like I'm so glad I have this electric assistance. You know what I mean? You're still pedaling, but it's a lot easier. But then the batteries all die, so we're just all slogging it up this hill. And then we get to once we arrive where the buses land, we're already like, oh my God, that was like 4 hours of riding or whatever it was. We were all reasonably tired, and we're like, all right, boys, let's do it. But at this point, I started thinking like, this is epic. Like, this is ridiculous. I like it. And then we hiked the whole thing. We didn't get to the summit before. We were kind of like maybe 3/4 up for sunrise. Still amazing. But when we got to the top, we were freaking wrecked. It was hilarious because we did what most people would do in like probably 12 hours in like 6 or something. Yeah, actually it'd be more than that if you went from the. I reckon 6 or 12 just to hike it. Anyway, it was stupid what we did, but we all freaking loved it. You know what I mean? And then to quote my friend, he was like, "I'm so glad we did that, but I'm never doing that again."
Yeah. I totally get that.
And I feel like it's that. I find those for the physical, especially physical adventures like that, being like a mountain or a kayak or something, to make it stupidly challenging makes it so much more fun as well, you know, as opposed to having done that in the normal way. It'd still be nice and everything, but I find it more fun when it's a little bit ridiculous, you know what I mean? Yeah, because that struggle is it's fun.
You know what's funny is that we've just hijacked the podcast and talked about struggle for the last hour or whatever. This has got nothing to do with this regret.
Yes.
It just reflects that, you know, that inner thing that we have about struggle, embracing struggle.
True that, matey.
That's so funny. So the regret was I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. So it's funny because my summary of this regret was don't hang out with Kents. Like, avoid critical, judgmental people.
Because you think if being around them will make you, even if you fight it, maybe a little bit more self-conscious.
Yeah. And that's how self-consciousness kind of happens, is like you're being judged by people. Because if you think about it, like kids are not self-conscious.
Yeah.
Like
I love that.
Yeah, they're taught that later on.
Yeah.
Like you should be ashamed of that. It's like,
it's true, man. That's one reason I really don't like bullying, is I feel like what it really does is makes people self-conscious.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and then it's funny how, being self-conscious makes you less of yourself.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like the appropriate word, self-conscious.
Yeah.
More like self-repressed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Self-ashamed or...
Yeah.
It's not good. But
it's interesting, hey, because there is some benefit to learning about yourself in the sense of how maybe I affect other people and being considerate, but to do that in a way that you don't repress yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the answer is awareness without judgment, so it's to be self-aware.
Yeah. So instead of saying to a kid, hey mate, like that's so embarrassing and all these people are thinking X, to instead say, hey, have you considered that maybe when you're doing that, that person might affect them in this way? Yeah.
Yeah.
So neutral, no judgment, but observations instead.
Yeah. How would it make you feel? Or do you remember when this thing happened to you and it made you feel X? Well, you're making that other person feel X now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the observer is the way to go, hey?
Oh, yeah. Awareness without judgment, hopefully.
Yeah.
It says, we must express our feelings in order to grow. It helps everyone. Honesty works. We should never feel guilty for expressing our feelings, and we should never make someone else feel guilty if they have the courage to do so.
Nice.
Yeah, so I always like to encourage people that are like a little bit left of field. Not even necessarily because of their ideas, but just having the courage to be a bit different. It's really required, because yeah, like there's just lack of growth with conformity. You know, if everybody just becomes the same thing, it's like there's no growth, because we all just, it's like society stays static, stable as this thing. So sad.
I was also thinking, I feel like a lot of the atrocities of the world are committed because, and I can understand it, but when the individual does not express their emotions about the thing because they're too scared, for example, and if they did, that would help give others the courage to do the same, and probably avoid a lot of these. So it's really important.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, what I was even going to say is that like we live, like people I think aren't aware that we're living in that age now. You know, there's cancel culture is what we call it, flippantly. But actually, as you said, atrocities in the world happen because the vast majority of people conform to a dangerous ideology. I would just maybe caution that we're in one of those ages now. Where people don't feel free to express themselves. And
we could be at any time. Like, you can never... Not even that you would relax against it, but... And the simple thing is, if you just express yourself honestly, that's sort of like the defense against it, maybe.
It's well, because there will always be people that express themselves. It's the judgment piece that I think it needs to be
yeah.
You're not allowed to say that, I think, is
yeah. If that is becoming the case in your society, that is a problem.
It reminds me of, spoiler alert, in Three Body Problem, like in the first scene where or maybe it's not the first, I'm pretty sure it's the first scene, where that scientist is like basically being publicly humiliated for believing in Einstein's theory of general relativity.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, have you been spreading this? And he's like, it's the best theory based on the available evidence.
Yeah.
I remember watching that scene and being like, I don't think that I would have the courage to be like, if I was literally going to get beaten to death, to be like, you guys are wrong about God. Yeah. Actually, Einstein is the way. I was like, I kind of like was feeling ashamed. I was like, would I have the courage to be like, you guys are fully wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. But is also that is that reckless rather than courageous at that point to be, you know what I mean? Could you do more good?
Yeah.
If you at that point withhold to survive and then,
I had a lot of respect for that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you're saying as well.
To give the summary from Nick, as in like, yeah, this guy was basically being made an example of, and fictionally, of course, he was being made an example of, and they were, I guess, they were trying to get him to break his honor, I guess, by saying what he doesn't believe, and he didn't. He kept speaking out what he believes, which resulted in, and he knew he would get killed for it.
Right.
Yeah.
The saddest part about that was they brought out his wife, who'd also become indoctrinated, and had now
flipped.
Yeah. But like she now was like she was against her own husband.
Yeah. And then interesting on that, man, because it was all like China revolution related.
Yeah.
The Chinese release of it, they cut all that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Censorship.
Yeah. Also, it was written by a Chinese person, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. So this is a this is one of the top regrets of dying people, that they wish that they had the courage to express their feelings. And then, so what I'm trying to get at now is like, why don't we express our feelings? And I think the primary reason we don't express our feelings is because there are people around us that don't make it safe for us to express our feelings. So first of all, you like take the responsibility of yourself to not be a Kent. Don't be an asshole. You know, try and be somebody who encourages free thought. Like, even if you don't, as Elon says, actually, free speech only matters when somebody says something that you don't like. Somebody you don't like says something you don't like. So
when they can do that, yeah.
So I think it's, for me, it's like, even if I don't really necessarily agree with the person, if I can see that it's well motivated, they've thought it through, all that kind of stuff, like I like there to be a diversity of opinions. So that's one piece of it. Like, don't be, I would say I don't want to be somebody who is like recklessly judgmental to a point where that person now feels that they're not safe to express their feelings.
And safe would mean free from judgment.
Free from judgment.
Yeah. Or condemnation or whatever.
Yeah. And it's like, I can disagree with your point of view without like saying that you're a bad person.
Yeah.
So it's like, we can have civil disagreement. That's what we should have.
And I think also even to have someone feel safe about expressing their thoughts, and that takes practice, because if you think just having no response to someone conveys that, I don't think so. You know, and like if someone says something and you look at them a certain way, they might feel judgment. So, and so I think you genuinely have to not judge it. That you can't fake it, if you know what I mean. Which again takes practice, I guess.
Yep.
Or almost it takes you being your kid self, if you can embrace that, because I feel like kids would naturally, they're learning so much that they kind of have to take everything in, and
I just want to bring up something that's said in the preface, because we've come back to it many times, where she says, regret-free living does not happen in a flash. It's created day to day in a process of conscious decisions, loving ourselves, and a bucket full of courage. So this is something that we've come back to over and over again, which is cool, because we came to it on our own without, you didn't even know it was in the book. But that's how she opens. Regret-free living does not just happen. It requires training. It requires a loving perspective to yourself and others, and a lot of courage. So it's a process, that even if you acknowledge that, okay, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, or whatever, our version of that, just because you know that doesn't mean that you're going to start living in accordance with that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Almost certainly not. So then it's a process. And part of the reason that it's a process is because you will have feedback to the contrary for the rest of your life. So then that's why it requires courage, because you will be an outlier. As I said, I think it requires the 4 cardinal virtues. So it also requires discipline, because there will be times when it's much easier to just go with the flow. Most of the time, it's way easier to conform. So I think, I just wanted to underscore that living a regret-free life is, it's actually not a holiday in itself. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of overcoming struggle. But the way that I look at it is like, you can view your life, the way that you're living, adopting a regret-free attitude. You can adopt that as like as a challenge in itself, in the same way that you might have a 60-day yoga challenge. How about 60-year regret-free life challenge? You understand what I mean? So this is a challenge that I've given to myself. I actually have
only 60 years, yes.
Well, however long, but it's like I've given myself the challenge of. I feel bad for not revealing it, but I don't want to. I most want to avoid regret number 1.
Yeah.
These other regrets are like secondary, I think. but yeah, so regret number 3 was I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. And what I was getting at before is that there's 2 pieces to this. The first is don't be a Kent. Don't be judgmental. Don't be an asshole. But then, so that's like, don't be judgmental. But then there's also, and this is like the most famous part of the reflections or the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. It's like, you will encounter people that are dickheads. Okay. So given that even if you are not a judgmental person, that you will come into contact with people that are judgmental, how ought you to live given that knowledge? And so this is where the courage piece comes in, that you know that you're going to come up against people that are going to judge you. How do you have the courage to express yourself given that knowledge? So this is why for me, the easiest way to do that is just to not spend any time around those kinds of people, because that removes that as a challenge. You will encounter them, but it doesn't mean that you have to, spend your time with them. So again, attention is your most precious resource. And I think you want to divest your attention into people that are just like not assholes, basically.
Some people may not be so fortunate though. Maybe their boss is such a person. So someone they have to spend time with.
Yep.
What are our thoughts there?
Well, I think like, first of all, minimize time. I think that one thing that often does happen is like you create like kind of a persona around that person, that you pretend basically to be civil around them while you have all these secondary thoughts. Obviously, like, as I might have told, I think I told you, but like the way that I chose my job was I was like, that person's a good person. It wasn't how much money do I make. It wasn't, do I even have expertise in the thing? Like I didn't. It was, do I feel good about being around this person? That was it.
Yeah.
And that's how I continue to make decisions on what I'm going to... It's not the thing. I'm not outcome oriented at all. I don't care about the thing.
Yeah.
If you work around people that are good people and you work hard, whatever comes out will be good.
Yeah. Nice.
So
I love that, man. I agree completely. That takes courage though in itself, because then I suppose you would say to this person that's boss is, let's say judgmental, perhaps get a different job then.
Perhaps, but I understand that that's difficult. I'm not just going to flippantly say that.
And that's putting a huge value on
yes,
not being around judgmental people, which I think is probably valid, but certainly not the normal.
Yeah, well, none of this is normal.
Yeah.
Another way of like thinking about this book is like, what are the things that normal people do that is really bad?
Yeah. I was also thinking that the courage on that front could be, because I'm just trying to think. I think I have one person in mind of like someone that's a bit judgmental that I come into contact with now and then. I almost like the thought of, I'm just still going to be me and not change it all, and let their judgment wash over me.
Yep.
But I hope that this somehow inspires them to be less judgmental. Because what is being judgmental? I feel like it's basically, I know better than you. That's not right. You should change. You should be like this. And I'm going to indirectly make you feel that whatever you're doing is wrong, so you conform to what I think is good. That's kind of my feeling on judgment. But when that person encounters someone that's freely going against that anyway, if you are like persistent and just consistently yourself, I feel like at a certain point they give up.
Yep.
Their judgment, they realize it's futile, and so maybe and hopefully they become enlightened, like, you know what, actually that guy's doing that and that's okay, and I don't know, maybe I should change how I feel about that thing, and maybe you could help them have the epiphany in some kind of way of, I mean, this podcast is amazing, I think, because if people are listening to it that realize, oh man, I am doing a bit of that, and then they're seeing the light, maybe that will change them. That's great. But even by just being that way in your day-to-day life could perhaps lead to that, the natural epiphany for some people.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a piece of it, man. Like that, this is what I'm getting at. So like, first of all, don't be judgmental. That's first thing. Second of all, it's like you will encounter those kinds of people. So then there are a few strategies. First of all, if there's a person in your life that's like that and you really can't remove them from your life, or you for some reason want to keep them in your life, do you have the courage or do you have the ability to keep being yourself regardless? And it also, like, I think one of the things that I talked about with your mum about around this is helpful here, which is that you want to establish boundaries with those people. Because being authentic doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries, right? So for me, it's like, I actually want to live with being surrounded by people around which I don't really need boundaries, because it just means less work, more intimacy. It's really difficult to have intimacy with a person where you have to keep putting up boundaries around them. So
yeah, interesting thing as well is I feel like for the right people, you don't really need to set boundaries, because there's probably always boundaries with any relationship, but you just naturally respect things, and hence there's no need for a boundary there.
Yeah, that's right. It just makes your life that much easier.
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, because there's probably things like I wouldn't ever do to you or say to you because it just wouldn't be right. But I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of subtlety there. You know, like I wouldn't want to ask X of you because it would, you know. Yeah, but that's a good point, man. Yeah,
it's like, you know, the secret, if you want to know what the secret is to managing people, it's to hire people that don't need to be managed.
Yeah.
And then if you want to know what the secret is to having like cohesive interpersonal relationships, it's like, be around people where they're not going to be a dickhead. You know, you don't constantly have to put boundaries up around them. They're not confrontational. It's actually really easy to have an intimate relationship with somebody that you want to be intimate with. So, this is what I'm getting at. That like, for me, actually, the 0th step to doing this is to just select the right people.
One question that's popped in mind: is that judgmental to presume certain people are judgmental?
Yeah, like, well, this is interesting because it's like one thing that has been said to me in the past is like, I'm not judgmental, I'm discerning. And it's like, well, you just used an adjective for judgmental. So it's like, and it's interesting because I thought about this earlier.
You just used an adjective for judgment and now fuck off.
Yeah, it's like, because I actually did think about this earlier when I said, like, don't be judgmental. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? Because without judging things, it's like really difficult to act, you know? Like we said earlier, it's like, if you're not judging anything as being right or wrong, good or bad, then it's like, what do you do? Because, you know, so what I more mean is like, when I say the words judgmental, what I mean is like you're making it unsafe for people to express their true emotions. Again, it's like you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but to give them the respect that they can express themselves freely.
And you're not doing that to the judgmental person by not spending time with them.
Yeah. So it's like, be discerning. But, you know, that's why, like for me, the summary of this is like, don't be a Kent, don't spend time around Kents, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the optimistic side of me, it is possible for judgmental people to realize that and become less so. Yeah, maybe by reading this book, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, do you agree? I mean, it's probably unlikely. Maybe like that most likely someone will remain in a similar way the whole life. What do you think?
This is another place where you and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Where I like, in my personal experience, I've never actually encountered somebody that was a Kent and then changed.
Yeah. And
wasn't a Kent.
Yeah.
And this is despite me being very forgiving to them, being very loving with them, being very patient with them, giving them many years. And in my opinion, that was, I think I'm comfortable in saying that was wasted time. That attention could have been better spent with other people.
But that'd be a sad thing to think that no one will change. Don't you think?
Uh, like
Because are we not changing ourselves by having these conversations and studying philosophy?
What I'm saying is that with a person who makes you feel unworthy, I would rather just cut them out of my life, because attention is my most precious resource, and I want to divest that into a very small number of incredibly important people, so that it's just the way that I personally want to divest my energy. I realize that that's quite strict. Like, I've had the feedback that, but I think it just reflects my personal taste. That with other people, they want to have they're okay having less intimate connections with much more people. And so they want to have that filter be a little bit wider, because they want to have more people in their lives, so that they don't want to cut out anybody unnecessarily. Whereas for me, it's like, and it goes back to Peck. Peck says that we have a finite capacity to love. Part of loving is divesting your attention to those people. For me, you have a finite capacity to attend, and I'm interested in having loving and intimate connections with a very small number of people. So given that that's what I want in life, my strategy has to be very strict. And as I said, once I started to live in accordance with that, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Just because the feeling tone of my life, I felt so much freer. I just like a whole weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because then there are these people where you're waiting for them to change. They've been awful to you, and they've made you feel unworthy. They've made you question whether or not you can express your feelings, which means then you're self-conscious and therefore inauthentic, leading to one of the biggest regrets that you can have in life, right? When I realized that I don't want that anymore, it was a big relief for me. So cognitively, I know I have the awareness that people can change. What I'm saying is, practically speaking, I don't ever bet on people changing. And I realize that it's up to them. You can give them, and I've just experienced this, you can give them years of support, all of that stuff, patience, all that sort of stuff, and they will never change. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then if, let's say, someone did change, how would they then come back into your life?
They probably wouldn't, because I have all of these really nice connections with this other group of people.
Yeah.
They might, I don't know.
Unless they really put effort and attention into making that happen, I suppose.
Maybe.
And then you sense that. Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, it's for me, it's difficult to imagine that, just because I'm so happy with where my life is already. So the question that you're asking me is akin to, let's say that you're married and you have a wife and kids and stuff. Don't you want to keep the option available that there might be somebody better out there for you? And an ex-girlfriend comes back and says, I didn't love you then, but I do love you now, and I love you much better than you'll love your current wife. That's kind of how that question lands for me, where it's okay, I have this whole history of you being a Kent. So while it might be true, I'm now committed to these other people. Commitment is a big thing for me, and as we've talked about before, it's the grass isn't green on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. So for me, it's and I know that a lot of people think don't you want to keep the door open for opportunities? For me, keeping the door open for opportunities is an attention leak. Some of your attention leaks out to, maybe the world could be better if blah, blah, blah. This is why I don't have a LinkedIn profile, because I'm 100% happy with my job. Do I want more opportunities? No. Because that idea, what's the assumption behind opening yourself up for opportunities? The assumption is that what you have now could be better, right? And it could be better by letting all these other opportunities in. My true perspective is, my life is 10 out of 10 amazing. So whatever you have to offer me is could make it a 9 or could make it a 1. I'd rather not jeopardize my life in that way. So, pretty unpopular, but that's how I live.
Couldn't make it an 11.
Not possible.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I noticed you use the phrase Kent a lot. What do you mean exactly?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking on the bus over, I was like, what am I going to say? Then I was like, should I say, don't be an asshole, don't be a dickhead? But then it just came up. Yeah. I don't know.
No, I think I like it. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I've just heard you use that word. I usually don't use that word.
Yeah, no one uses it. Oh, actually, yeah. Anouk gave it to me. Yeah, back in uni. Yeah.
Yes. Just to cap off this chapter, the author, because part of this book is a memoir, and she's talking about how these experiences with people that were on their deathbed, how it affected her and changed her life. So one of the ways that she caps off this chapter is by talking about like how her own sense of like self-consciousness has changed. And she said, like, in the past, my sense of unworthiness and helplessness had not enabled me to ask for help or even to think of anybody I could ask. Nurturing my own lack of self-worth no longer served me. So she kind of let it go. So it's like she learned, like, as I said, like kids don't have a lack of self-worth. They don't have self-consciousness. They're told that. So then there were people in her life that made her feel like she should lack self-worth. And when she realized that that idea was no longer serving her, she let go of it. Obviously that took time, training, but it's possible to live that way. Should we move on to regret 4?
Yeah.
I think these last 2 regrets are easier to address. So regret number 4 is I wish I'd stayed in contact with my friends. And so what does this actually mean though? It means I wish I had true friends in my life that accept me for who I am. Kind of goes back to that 3rd regret actually. Because it's like, yeah, like maybe you have a lot of people around you, but they don't really know who you are because you never really expressed it. Like, like oftentimes people have like a lot of workmates. Well, who do they see? They see the person that you are at work, which is not always who you truly are. So, and then it becomes a bit complicated for you to let them into certain personal aspects of your life, because then you're mixing your work and your personal life. So the regret here is that there's this belief that like your high school friends or your primary school friends know who you really are. So therefore, I wish that I'd kept those friends. But for me, it's like what I found personally is that actually a lot of the people that I met in piano society in university are like my closest friends. I'm not really sure why. Even the way that I met you was through somebody that was a piano society with me. So yeah, I think really the regret around this chapter is like not having people in your life that you can feel fully yourself around, which again goes to like judgmentalness. And
my take on it was also to like put the effort in, because and maybe it ties into the work thing, where I can understand in the sense of if I'm working on the film, like I literally told some of my close friends, kind of like when you go into the cave, like, hey guys, I'm like in production in the next 2 months. I think I might have even told you.
Yep.
And like, so I'm probably going to be pretty not responsive, and I'm just focused on this, trying to get this done. So, and I try to restrict that to shorter periods of intensity, so that I'm not, because being like that all the time, then I would almost have no friends because I'm not giving them any time or attention.
Okay.
And so maybe my thought on that is that like if you were to live your whole life like that, so committed to your work and focused on that, and even maybe your hobbies, and at the detriment of like spending time or focus on your friends. Yeah. Because I could see that being, I could see me doing that if I wasn't conscious and thinking about it, and if I didn't value friends, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. No, that's actually brilliant, because that was the next point I was going to bring up. That's the strategy, is to allow yourself to make time for friends, to make it a priority. And that's something that you and I do. We make friendship a priority. Yeah.
Can't remember who it was, but I like their take on this, where they said if they set a social thing in their calendar,
right,
they treat that with as much respect as they would if it were a work meeting or something.
Yep.
So if work ever says, hey, can you push out, stay a bit later on X, sorry, I've got to, I'm seeing my friend, which a lot of people would just be like, oh, sorry, mate, to your friend, sorry, man, I got to work a bit later, so I can't make it. Whereas he's taking the opposite approach of like, I can't work because I'm seeing a friend, which is epic. Yeah. Yeah, so in that, I guess that's another small sign of often people will prioritize the work over friends and things like that. Whereas it really probably should almost be the other way around.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think so.
Easier said than done sometimes.
All of these things are really hard.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to choose, like, I mean, I say it flippantly because for me it's like
hard,
like,
depending on your perspective.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
If you have the right perspective, it wouldn't be a hard decision.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think it takes training and time, but eventually it's like it's almost obvious that you obviously would want to live like this. So, cool. Regret number 5 is I wish I'd let myself be happier. So part of this is to say happiness is now. Happiness is in the present. Like, again, one of the modern lies is like, if you work for 40 years, then eventually you'll be happy in retirement. No, happiness always happens in the present. If
you get the X, you will be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, X is happy.
Yeah.
X is now. So the notes that I wrote down here, it's all a matter of perspective. Can you find joy in what you're doing now? And can you focus on that? Because to me, again, with perspective change, it's obvious, but it's like the thing that you're going to get is less important than happiness in my perspective. Any outcome. We talked about it in the Aristotle podcast. It's like that's an intrinsic good, and you do everything that you do is to be happy. So can you just skip to the end? And oftentimes you can. So this thing around I wish that I'd let myself be happy is like, I wish that I hadn't postponed my joy. I wish that I hadn't put it 10 years in the future.
That's so interesting as well, because I'm imagining if you're about to die, would you not be thinking, I just want to be happy now? It's interesting to regret that you weren't happy in the past. Don't you think?
Interesting.
That's something I'll have to think about more. Because for example, like, I don't tend to regret that I wasn't quite happy yesterday. I can't, I'm not saying I wasn't happy yesterday, but if I had a great day yesterday, to be clear. Yes. But let's say yesterday I wasn't happy for some reason. I don't think I'd regret that today. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so I guess it's like the cumulative, big picture, how that affects things over time if you're consistently. Yeah, interesting. And it's top 5, so it's not just one person. It's like the most common thing, right? So.
Yeah,
my take on that is live in the moment, enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So I think there's less to say about that.
Yeah. No, it's good, man. It's good. Enjoy the struggle. I think for me, it's like if I'm worried about the outcome so much that it's like it has to happen, then I don't enjoy the moment. And like you say, then the outcome can happen and it may not be what you expected. But if you become more accepting, work hard for the outcome, work so that you maximize the chance of it happening, but enjoy the work. Very good.
I think another one of the modern myths is that, children are happy, adults are not. Yeah. So that one thing that you like is naivety. I remember in one podcast I was like, maybe this is too naive, and you were like, never.
Yeah.
So it's actually with one of my ex-girlfriends, like, I got the feeling that she thought that my happiness was just not appropriate for an adult. Like, why are you so happy about that? When, we need to do renovations and we need to get a better car, and you're silly for being happy with what we have. So that, that's another modern myth that, I was listening to this story the other day where this guy was saying to his kid, like, the kid asked, like, why do you drink alcohol? And he didn't want to lie to his kid. So he goes, okay, the reason I drink alcohol is because being an adult is really hard and it makes me sad. And this, like, makes me less sad. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That's what he thinks the purpose of alcohol is. And also that he's taken it as a given that adulthood is sad.
Yeah.
And you need to, and it's appropriate to numb yourself from that sadness.
He needs that little Chinese girl to smack some truth in him, just with her words.
Yeah.
Also thinking about this, the happiness thing, man. For some reason, the Count of Monte Cristo popped up. It's a classic novel, but also it's made into a film a few times. I think there's I think it's 2002, the version that I have watched the most, and I really like it. Great film, you should watch it if you haven't seen it. But the two sort of two strong characters in it. There's a count, so he's like from a very wealthy family and has everything you could ever want, kind of like we're saying, born with everything. And then there's Edmond, the protagonist, who is his friend from childhood, but is much more like from a working class family. But they're just friends for whatever reason. And it's just so freaking well, like a great film does. It just gives you the insight of Edmond is the poor one, but he's happy and he's loving his life. And the Count's son has everything, but he's jealous of Edmond. And you can see how, like, mate, you've got it all. Why are you, like, not happy about your friend's success? Why must you have more than him? It's just very yeah. And then Edmond's partner, I'll say, when she's talking to the Count's son, she says, I remember, like, on your birthday when you got your pony, and you were still so upset because you weren't as happy with your pony as Edmond was with his whistle. Like, you got to. It's just so well expressed that perspective on everything.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of the guys that teaches like course on happiness at Harvard said, like, if you had to sum it up, like, the key to happiness is low expectations. And maybe I would say, like, low entitlement.
Yeah.
That you're happy.
Well,
with.
Entitlement is an expectation. Yeah.
That you're happiest with the smallest things. I would agree with that, actually. That and when I like, for me, I realized that the big things aren't as fulfilling as actually the small things. And the small things are here now. They don't require money, status, or so. Be like the fisherman. Yeah, and it's all, as you said, it's like, it's funny because you had this little thing where you were like, it's all perspective, and it's like, it seems easy,
Yeah.
So it seems like just a choice, and it's theoretically easy. It's simple but not easy, maybe.
Yeah. Probably what's hard about it is maybe to have the perspective that we seek. You need to accept reality and truth, and that's not easy sometimes. Oftentimes, actually.
Right.
But if you can push through that difficulty, then it's not difficult to have it.
You ready for the top regret?
Yes, let's do it.
Drum roll. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than living up to the expectations of others. Yeah. So this is, just want to now again reiterate, this is the top regret that, okay, so again, this is not a systematic review, but among the people that Bronnie Ware helped to die, this was, and she said it wasn't even close, this is by far the most common regret that people have on their deathbed. That I wish I was true to myself rather than, let's say, conforming. And I don't know if you noticed in my little snapshot that I sent to you, but actually 2 of the regrets directly have the word courage in them. I wish that I had the courage to live a life true to myself, and I wish that I had the courage to express my feelings and emotions. So the reason that I circled those is because that year, the thing that I was focusing on was courage, one of the cardinal virtues. And I was like, how do I be more courageous? That was my kind of like, maybe even New Year's resolution. So when it came up twice in like the top regrets of dying people, I was like, cool. And I think like it's really easy to read a really insightful book. Oh, and I should say, man, we've talked about a lot of impactful books, and we'll talk about more impactful books on this podcast. I would say if there was only one book that I could recommend, it would be this one. Yeah. As I said, I think like every other decision is a footnote on the decision, how ought we to live? And I think that in modern life, there's kind of this veneer that we're not going to die, even though people kind of cognitively know that's true. And I think that veneer is removed. All the emptiness is removed when you actually are going to die.
Yeah. Gives you clarity on what's important.
It's funny how these people just get clarity. They don't have to be philosophers. They just get clarity. Because I think that people kind of, as I said, people kind of know. When I say I don't use social media, people go, oh my God, good for you, man. They know it's bad. I'm like, good for me. Why don't you do it then? So I think that like, and as we've said, there's such a deep wisdom to children. I don't think that deep wisdom ever leaves us. I think it's always there. It's just that we kind of ignore it.
I feel like we pile things on top of it.
We pile things on top. That's right.
So you got to then delve through to get back to it.
Yeah. That's the work. Yeah. That's the work. So how do we do this? How do we live true? And the answer is that, the answer that she gives us, that we live less by our ego, less by the mind, more by the heart. And we do so by, she actually says, counter to what you think, you do so by surrendering. You do so by handing yourself over to a greater force. Now, this is directly related to Peck's grace, that we are guided by the hand of God with infinitely greater wisdom than ourselves. So she says, our environment has a huge effect on us, which I would totally agree with. Especially when we start living more consciously, because we're like very aware of like what people are doing. When we remove, as you said, when we remove all the stuff that we stacked onto our like baby self, who has like really bright big eyes and is like taking in the world, that part of us sees a lot of stuff. So she says, the pain I accepted from others was their own suffering projected onto me. Happy people don't treat others that way, nor do they judge themselves or others for living a life true to themselves. Compassion starts with yourself. After speaking up, things started to change within me. I grew in self-respect. Simple but not easy, it's like the message is that like you kind of already know the answers, you already know that alcohol is kind of bad for you, but like everybody does it, so like I'm gonna drink every now and then or whatever. We kind of already know the answers, and I think one way that, you know, I don't think I've ever told you this, but like one thing that I started to do kind of naturally when I was 23 was like, I would think for a given action, I would think, I would imagine my daughter, Sophia, imaginary. If she could watch me doing this, would she be like, Daddy, why are you doing that? You know, or would I be like, you know, I'm doing it for this? Would I be proud to say, Sophia, I'm doing it for this reason? Or would she kind of lose respect for me? I had like little daughter in my head, and she's wiser than I am, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's a high bar. But you know, that one is that part of us is very innocent and wise. So started to try and live from that place more.
Cool. And you continue to do so?
Yep. Yeah.
That sounds very similar to, I can't remember which Stoic it was. Is it Seneca? They say to like, if you're about to do something and you're not sure what to do, imagine someone you really respect is standing next to you. And how would you act in that matter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've done that similarly. It wasn't my own little daughter, but just someone I really respect. I was like, if they were here, what would I do? And that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think with the daughter thing, it's like, I really don't want to let her down.
Yeah.
Like even more than somebody I respect.
Yeah, yeah.
So as I said, it's like a really high bar.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Who do you really respect? My imaginary daughter. Yes.
She's awesome.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you was, you said one of those years your resolutions might have been to become more courageous. How did you work at becoming more courageous?
It's interesting because like I think the primary way that I did it was just by reminding myself, like in the same way that you have a French chateau and you're like, you know, keep thinking about it, I'm going to manifest it eventually. I just put it at the forefront. Like whenever I would journal about courage. And you know, that I think that's when I bought this picture of Socrates at his death, where he's like defiantly being like, I'm going to drink this hemlock, I don't care, I didn't do anything wrong. And he's like defiantly going to his death. So I had that picture of Socrates. I would wake up in the morning and see that, you know. But what I realized in the end is that in the beginning, like I associated courage with like valor, honor in the battlefield. Like that's how we kind of think about courage. And then I realized there's kind of an internal courage that is expressed in this book where it's like, actually it's quite courageous to live authentically, to express yourself truly, and to be okay to be the one that's different in the room, to be the only person who loves grants, who loves writing grants. It's fine to be that. And I think I just became increasingly more okay. I became less dependent on external validation. And one of the things that was like, that I kept writing in my journal was like, if it's right to do, it's right for you. You know, like don't worry about if other people are judging you for it. If it's right, if you've convinced yourself with good evidence that it's right, just do it. That's the only thing that matters. So it was like, yeah, it was interesting because it was like, I would say it wasn't very spectacular. It wasn't like, I'm courageous and I'm going to go climb Mount Everest and I'm going to, you know, whatever, learn how to fight or something like that. It was like, no, I'm going to have the courage to be an honest, authentic person, which is really hard. And so, yeah, I took that year to like just constantly remind myself in my journaling when I'm thinking about, okay, how do I feel about this, and getting my emotions out on the page, and then how do I move forward? It's like, okay, you move forward with courage. And then, you know, books like this and Socrates and even Jesus, it's like, that was a courageous person. and just having those people around me mentally, being like, what would they do in this circumstance, and then trying to get closer to that. And
I think it's the thing that the more you do it, the easier it becomes to be.
I think so.
More so, right? Yeah.
I think it's like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like, it was a gradual process. It's not like I was like, I'm gonna now become courageous and do this like full on huge thing.
Yeah. So for anyone that's struggling with that or working on it, I think a good way to start would be just small acts of courage, perhaps, and then building upon them.
Yeah, they snowball. Yeah, don't judge yourself as well. Like, if you're somebody, maybe the most courageous thing you do in your life is that you stand up to your father. Let's say, I can't remember what it was, but like, it was that video with that Chinese girl who stood up to her father. Like, one of the top comments was, as a Chinese person, I would never stand up to my father in that way, and I'm so glad that this young girl did it. So maybe that's the most courageous thing you do in your life, or this year, or in this week, that you stand up to somebody that made you feel unworthy. That's a courageous act. It doesn't have to be whatever you see in the movies as being courageous.
And you can do it in a quiet manner as well.
That's right.
Quiet, thoughtful manner.
Yeah. Yep. It doesn't have to be spectacular.
Yeah.
Your life gradually becomes amazing. Yeah. Is that something that you've thought about, courage, or
what about it?
Like bringing that more into your life, or
not like not strictly like I want to be more courageous. For me, it's probably like I obviously want to respect myself, and so I think it's just a natural thing of where you have to be courageous about what is right and what you think you should do. Yes. So it's just like a natural thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be thinking specifically about courage, but if I did something that I didn't agree with, then So I don't think I specifically think about it. Maybe a bit more bigger picture, reflecting instead.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely, like, what comes to mind is like sometimes you'll be like, hey Nick, I have this situation going on, and I just want to tell you about it because I don't think what I did was admirable. Okay. And I'll be like, okay, tell me about it. And then I'll be like, what do you mean? That was great. Like what you did, like you have a high bar for yourself in terms of, so I think that's courageous, because you'll tell me about scenarios where you think that you could have been better. So that's very vulnerable. And I think that that's courageous. So that kind of thing comes to mind for me, for you. Yeah, and then it's very, like, once you have that kind of relationship with somebody, it's like very freeing.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to have this veneer of like pretending to be a certain thing around them.
Yeah. Great example. That was just before we started this podcast. It was a bit hot in the room. So I took my shirt off and I was like, Nick, you don't mind if I have my shirt off for this podcast, do you? Is that weird? He's like, it's a bit weird. so I put my shirt on, and I just said to him, I'm so comfortable that I know you can tell me that, because then I know, like, if you said that's fine, like it's fine, and and it doesn't bother me anyway, and I feel so much more comfortable than if it was someone where I suspected maybe they're not comfortable. That's just that's so, you know what I mean? Then I got to start making all these guesses and the
worst. Transparency is the best.
Yeah.
Honesty is so freeing.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually I might close by saying, like, the way that she caps off that chapter is to say that love is to accept people for who they are and have no expectation of them. Unconditional love. And then I made a note that if you do that, they'll grow on their own. You know, you don't have to force them to grow. They'll grow on their own, because as we talked about, it's like growth is like so intrinsically rewarding. It like to not want to grow is going against resistance. To want to grow, I think, is actually more natural than to not want to grow. So I think that if you give them that space, that love and acceptance, and say, I love you for who you are, they'll want to grow. Actually, there's this saying in Texas that Jesus loves you, and he loves you way too much for you to keep being who you are. So something like that, where it's like, although that's like maybe a tinge judgmental, but that's my belief that, like, for instance, I don't need to worry about, is Lockie gonna grow?
Yeah.
I don't need to, that's not a concern of mine. And so, I think it's like, if you give them the space where you show them that they're fine who they are, they will want to change for themselves. So that
grow into themselves. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not to say you're not fine as you are, but it's like maybe you could be more yourself. Learn about more about yourself. Yeah, express that. Yeah.
Yeah, like one way to think about it is that, like, you are potential.
Yeah, that's cool.
And to express yourself is to fulfill that potential. And it just makes me think again that, like, as we talked about in, I can't remember which episode, but it's like, self-actualization leads to self-transcendence. Like, eventually, like with you, it's like, once you learn, iron cross or something, it's like, then you immediately share that. Like, it's so natural as a human to, hey, I figured this thing out, guys. Like, here, like, let me share it with you. It's so intrinsically rewarding to, once you've met your goals, to then switch and become a person who supports other people to reach their goals. So that's truly loving. And it's interesting that, it's really difficult to give something that you don't have. It's really difficult to love other people if in some sense if you hate yourself. So it's always got to begin with you, and then I think it radiates out naturally. And I think that you would have to put resistance in your way for it not to radiate, not for love not to radiate out. So begins with you. And I just want to reiterate that regret again, because I think it's so important. That the top regret on these people's deathbeds is, I wish that I had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than living up to the expectations of others. I just get so inspired reading that. Like, and as I said, this is actually something that is a challenge for me. That above all other challenges, there's a meta challenge, which is to live authentically. It doesn't happen in a day, and you'll have days where you act inauthentically, and then got to get back on the horse. Like, it's like any other challenge.
Yeah, it takes daily effort and reflection and focus and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not automatic. Yeah, which is somewhat interesting, isn't it? It's not automatic to be authentic.
That's right. Yeah, there's a social inertia pushing you away from.
Yeah. Although you've cultivated a pretty good social inertia, or maybe you've minimized that in how you're.
But I took many years of consistent effort, and it's something that I'm still privy. Like, it's still. I'm not in the clear. The voices of everybody, of millions of people, are very loud. So, for me, it's like that process of refining the voices that I want to listen to, and perhaps maybe the loudest voice is your own. Like, figuring out how to get in touch with your own voice. Yeah. Cool, man. Should we wrap up there? Well, thank you. As always, thanks very much for your time and attention. As I said, this is the book that I would recommend if I had to recommend only one book. I think it's an untapped resource of, just tremendous experience that none of us ever get to have. So, highly recommend the book. And till next time, see what's here now when there's no problem to solve.